In every step of the design, installation, protection, and maintenance of underground utilities, there are people working diligently and innovatively to reduce damages. All of these people need and deserve to have their stories told, which is what we do here at Planet Underground TV. We'd like to thank our sponsors: Electric Conduit Construction, HBK Engineering, and C-Scan.
Excavators putting in telecom conduits for new fiber lines, hitting gas lines while they do so. That's our damage prevention industry's #1 concern right now. No sooner can we focus on one digging accident, another one occurs. I mean, what goes through the mind of somebody who's putting in a conduit and strikes a gas line? Well, maybe we need to think about what goes on in the minds of people who put in these lines successfully, who don't have damages. What is it that they think about? The result of 3 boring accidents as seen through the lens of security cameras. Homerville, Georgia, Canton, Illinois, and Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. Our episode 5 featured the impact that a telecom boring accident had on Canton, Illinois.
I'd say this was pretty damn serious. There's where the building used to be. It used to come all the way out to right there where that pole is, and it's gone completely. My God, mayhem. God, I hope no one died.
Our last episode, the same for Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
Explosion, I think it was like 7 p.m. that it happened, and it's a good thing that was after rush hour, just missed it, because it would have been a lot busier. This is Main Street, this is the main strip of Sun Prairie. It runs the entire length. It's the street you use if you need to get anywhere. So if it happened during rush hour, that would have been a big problem, and thank goodness to the first responders that were able to block off the area because they knew it was coming. It's a shame that they couldn't stop the explosion. So many lives were saved because of the first responders, it being so close to rush hour.
Some telecom installation projects can be years in the making, and they can cover huge swaths of metropolitan areas.
A lot of challenges in just logistically. We're talking my area. I have the suburbs, so my area is from Valparaiso all the way to Wisconsin border. There's 3,800 miles of fiber. It's more like a spider web, and challenges are going to be, a lot of the locates and damages and preventing and making sure that the locates are correct. I just got a phone call 2 minutes ago about unmarked gas line, and the contractor hit it, nicked it. But still, it's those types of things that, of course, will slow it down, and so that's a big part of it, is making sure that locates are done and they're done properly.
The good news is that there are contractors out there who don't have damages because they do things the right way. How they conduct their work and how they think about their work while they're doing it is instructional footage that everyone in the underground utility world needs to see.
Best practices for pre-construction activity, we like to suggest the use of a pre-job briefing. That's where we're going to do a task hazard analysis. The foreman will look at the site and the task being performed, break it down into a step-by-step basis, and then look at each hazard involved for each of those. They're going to then specify how they mitigate those hazards step by step.
One of the things that is so important in underground damage prevention is to do a pre-construction meeting with your crew. Make sure that you have a toolbox meeting, talk about all the hazards, safeties on the job, look at the locates out there, make sure you have an 811 ticket with you at all times, have everything that you need either in your hand or on an app or something that you can use.
Number one, find your utilities. I think that's first and foremost before you even put that rod in the ground. You got to make sure that everything is marked, everything is accurately marked, and basically going over that drill, make sure everything's in proper working order, and it's like any other machine. It's not going to have any give when it comes to your bones or anything like that. So, it's a dangerous machine. That's for sure. It's got some, don't let the size fool you, because they got some power.
All right, so right now Mike wants me to spin out. So as you're spinning, you look at your top left gauge, and that'll indicate how much torque it has, how much torque is going through to spin it out. So right now, the ground being a little rocky, you can see it's higher. But as you start to push, you can see that climbing. When you're spinning, this indicates how much pressure, how hard the machine is pushing. As you're spinning, that should be lower.
So Chris, how long have you been working in directional boring?
I've been doing directional boring here at Western for about 11 years now.
Okay, so when on different jobs doing directional boring, or people that you've talked to during directional boring, what is the worst accident you've heard of happening during that task?
Most of them, I believe, would be gas main hits. I actually been a part of one. It was several years ago. Directional drilling job. We actually drilled through an 8-inch main line pressure Nicor gas main, and it shut down a mile radius of the area. It was just a bad situation. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. The outcome was good. It was mislocated quite a ways.
So what do you guys do to try to avoid having a situation like that happen? What do you do to avoid that mismarking of utility lines such as gas?
What I've learned in the last several years that I've been here is typically with gas and electric, if we're potholing and we don't find something, that kind of raises the flag a little bit. Typically we can dig a window on it and drill through it. But with gas and electric, I typically don't like to do that. Maybe we'll get the locator back out to see maybe if he missed something, or maybe it wasn't hooked up right, to see why we're not finding what we're looking for.
Well, if you're not safe running that drill and you're not finding your laterals as you're crossing them, gas, for instance, if you clipped a 1-inch gas service to a home, and even if we didn't know about it, the risk could be severe. That natural gas could run up that trench line to that home, ignite, and actually explode that home.
Right now, I'm physically watching our tool head cross this utility that we already shot past. We're pulling our product back in the ground. I make sure we have the plywood under there to protect that underneath our rod, to protect that gas service. And I'm keeping him with my locator in 12 o'clock to make sure I know what clock position he is in, passing that. And I'm in constant contact with him over the radio to make sure that he does not rotate, nothing happens. We get past this utility safely before he continues to rotate and core out his hole pulling back.
Granted, there are telecom boring jobs where nothing is potholed, like this job in New Orleans a few years back. Certainly, potholing all the marked utilities all the time is much better than just boring deep and assuming that the bore is running too deep to hit anything. Exposing all the mark lines on a bore project is better than not exposing any of them at all. Just setting the bore at 11 foot, 12 foot, and assuming that you're running deep enough not to hit any of the marked lines. But by exposing all the lines, but not down to the depth of your excavation, simply stopping when you expose the marked lines, saying I found the line, now I'll just go deeper, that can have tragic results too, as we saw in the JJ's restaurant explosion in Kansas City in 2013. The contractor for the telecom company saw two marks, a yellow mark and a red mark. When they potholed the marks, there were two black conduits laid side by side. Those conduits were 2 foot deep. The contractor then decided to set his bore depth at 3 foot, but as they bored underneath the exposed conduits, they struck a 2-inch plastic gas main that was exactly 3 foot deep.
So if you're hand digging down to the depth of your excavation and your bore depth is 5 feet, you dig down 3 feet, you find a line, you think that's your target line, but it really isn't. It could be an abandoned line. It could be a live line, but then there's another live line 2 feet underneath it. So you really have to use the best practices of hand digging down to the depth of excavation within the tolerance zone, making sure all the marks make sense.
Well, first thing we do, we'll start hand digging to try and find these utilities, see if they make sense first. Then we'll start hand digging to try and find them. Julie's rule is 18 inches. Our company goes 3 feet. So, we always want to try to find that utility before we bore and not just say, oh, it's not here, let's just continue on.
With all the cable going in the ground these days, everything's getting congested, so doing a lot of hand digging, prudently hand digging and exposing all our utilities and making sure we find everything before we stick that tool head in the ground.
East, west, north, south, however we're gonna bore, we definitely have to depend on what these utilities are telling us, and that's gonna dictate where we run. A lot of times we might run at 3 feet, there's other times we might have to run at 8 feet. It all depends on those utilities and where they're at. That's gonna dictate our bore path eventually.
I just dealt with one a month ago. 20-inch high pressure main, 6-inch high pressure main, 8-inch standard pressure main, 2-inch standard pressure main, all ran down this road between the boulevards and in the street. And when I got on site, the driller says, well, I'm gonna do this, and we'll see if we can snake through like this, and I'll probably have to set up right here, and I don't know if we'll maybe have to set up twice. And I said, look, number one, I don't want you within 2 feet of that 20-inch high pressure main. Number two, I said, let's just stop and think about this. Are we better off to open cut this road, half the road at a time, get our traffic in place, and hydrovac it, instead of even trying to drill, instead of even taking the chance? That is exactly what we did. We cut the blacktop, we brought our big hydrovac out there, we hydrovac'd the trench. So you gotta weigh out, it's a very populated area. And when I explained to the crews, they said, well, that'll take this much extra time and we'll have to do this. And I said, look around you. This is all residential. We get into any one of these mains and we cause an explosion, what's gonna happen? Can you sleep with yourself at night? Because I can't. And as quality assurance, I can't let you do this. So we're gonna take the safest route, whether it takes us more time or not, and we're gonna back this trench open and not even take that chance.
If I had to give advice to somebody that was just starting on a directional bore machine, I think the first thing I would tell them is to be patient. It's a learning experience. You're not going to figure it out in one day or 1 year. I've been doing it for almost 20 years, and there's still things that I'm willing to learn and make things easier, safer, faster. So in terms of a new guy coming in, take your time. It's not a bulldozer. It's a finesse machine, and the easier you are with it and let that machine do what it's supposed to do, you'll have longevity of that machine, and things will go smooth and costs will stay down.
How does the utility industry ensure that all boring crews do the right things? Manufacturer-led training is an awfully good start.
What we see here, HDD circuit, this started from a lot of customers, the industry demanding more qualified operators to fill the pipeline with the work that was coming up. So we launched our first program in November 2015 with a select group of 8 guys just to kind of pilot it off. And it was very successful. We learned a lot, and from those learning experiences, we created what we have here today, HDD Circuit. It's a 2-week program here at the factory. Guys come, we do an introduction to Vermeer. We get them up in the classroom, and right off the bat, they're taking a pre-test just so we can see where is their knowledge base right now with the industry. From there, we go through, I'd say, a 6-hour classroom time, which covers safety, mud mixing, drilling fluid mixing, what are drilling fluids, how are they being used, what are all the common components on a rig that they would see, and lastly, calculations such as setup calculations, mud mixing calculations that they're gonna encounter.
So one small thing that I learned was for 15 years I've been drilling, and every time I get to the end of a joint to locate, I put my sonde in the 12 o'clock position. And I do it just out of consistency. Here they teach you that if you end at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock, you have a more accurate pitch. What's really nice here is even though it's just simply potato dirt, I mean, it's beautiful to drill in, for just getting the fundamentals and the basics and getting precision, it's awesome, you know. And then, you know, when we get back home, obviously it won't be quite as nice, but just the basic fundamentals of what is happening and what needs to happen, that never changes.
With the very recent release of the National Transportation Safety Board's report on the Canton, Illinois explosion, we're really able to look into the minds of the drilling crew that caused the gas line damage. And because we're able to do so, it's indeed very worrisome. Take a moment to read these words that are taken from the NTSB interview of one of the laborers on the boring crew in Canton, Illinois on November 16, 2016. We do not dig down. If we find a drop wire, a telephone wire at 4 inches deep, and we've determined that that is the wire we're looking for, we do not dig down 36 inches deep to watch our bore head go underneath that telephone line. Yes, you usually can see the head of the machine. Depending on the depth, if the depth is deeper than what the utility is, sometimes you won't see it, but you'll be deep enough that you know you're underneath of it. Telling me just to go ahead. You know, we are at 2 feet from our pothole. He tells me you're fine. You're 18 inches over here, coming to your handhole at 32 inches. Didn't totally agree with it, but I went ahead and did it anyway because I have a family that I need to take care of, and I need money. And like I said, I totally didn't agree with it, but at the same time, I also didn't believe that this gas service was going to drop 14 to 16 inches in 2 feet. So, but on instances like this, I mean, if we dig it up there, I still wouldn't have watched my drill head go through. Because I mean, well, let's just say if we did dig it up there and it was 18 inches deep and I was going 32, I would have never seen my drill head. So, but honestly, I don't know how deep it was there. I don't know if we hit it with a drill head or if we pushed a rock into it, brick, rock. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Well, he knows that it could be his life at stake if he doesn't pothole, for one. So that's pretty much that they would want to do that. The other thing is, I've got zero tolerance for that. If you hit something, you're gone. You're done. If you have a net fault damage and I investigate, I will go out and check and investigate, and if that was not done properly, you don't have a job here anymore. You can go down the road. I don't have time for that. Let's take him for his word. Whenever they bored, they always potholed all the lines. What this means is that the one time they didn't, a fatal explosion occurred. In the end, it's the game time decisions that boring crew members make that can put the crew, as well as the public, at risk.
Today, the topic is damage prevention. You know, in the environments that we work in, especially for utility and the contractors installing those utilities, the environment can be very challenging. The underground infrastructure is continuing to increase, and we're always trying to find ways to excavate safer, to minimize damage to underground facilities, ultimately protecting the public.
Here today we've got George, and what we've done is we've shot in to pull back, or shot out to pull back some service pipe. But before we pull back that gas service pipe, what we like to do is we like to pull a camera through the hole. By pulling the camera through the hole, as you can see George has on the screen here, he's basically verifying that we don't have any cross bores or any utilities in conflict of our bore. It's one step in our very lengthy damage prevention process. In many circumstances, in the city of Chicago, for People's Gas, also at Nicor Gas here in this direct area, what we do is we have a pre-camera process where we would actually go pre-camera the main line and all the sewer laterals before even doing any underground work. When we install the services, we take it a step above and we actually pull that camera back through the borehole to make sure that no utilities are in conflict. It's a significant amount of peace of mind. It's the right thing to do. All this information here, we go ahead and we capture that data, we store it electronically, and we keep it. So in the event down the road, if for some reason there was some sort of damage thought to be a result of our work, we go ahead and we have all that information where we can basically ensure that our work did not result in a conflict.
So just this morning, the day we chose to film the narration for this episode, complaints, firefighters' death, injuries caused by negligence of 4 companies. Lawsuits filed by the widow of a firefighter who died and 2 firefighters who were injured in the Sun Prairie explosion say 4 companies are to blame. Fire Captain Corey Barr was killed in the explosion that destroyed a bar he owned, 5 other businesses, and a home on July 10th. His widow, Abby Barr, has filed a wrongful death lawsuit. The complaints point to numerous safety failures and negligence by the companies involved, which the lawsuits claim led to the explosion. There's no shortage of utility contractors that double-check all the utility marks before they begin any sort of construction project. They use their own locating equipment.
Just to know when you're walking out a shot, looking for those topside services, looking for the gas meters, make sure it's marked out. You know, circling around the entire house and looking where every utility along the house or along a business is located at. And then, I mean, if it's located or not, we still hook up to it just to make sure it's not in our bore path. We cover all our bases. We have every utility accounted for in our bore path.
How much of the boring accident issue is a result of mislocating or the lack of locating?
You know, they want your crews on these jobs as your digger or your Julie ticket is good to dig on. And what we're finding is we're getting, you know, because of the workload too, utility locators aren't able to keep up with the demand. You know, the customer's pushing you to have crews on site, and we're having them there, and we've got utilities that aren't marked. We've got mismarks and stuff like that. So what it's resulting in is, you know, you've got to call back into digger or Julie, and you've got a wait time now, and now you have downtime on your crews on the street.
In other cases, our damage prevention culture is resistant to the promise of new technology.
The great part of this is you can find out quickly. I mean, you've got your phone hotspot. When you upload to your phone hotspot, this can be viewed instantly. So now we can catch bad habits before the damage. We'll know, you would know as a supervisor or manager watching this, you would know if one of your people aren't following your best practices, and then they can send a supervisor out and fix that before the damage happens.
A bit of our damage prevention culture is resistant to the notion of double checks.
So those drawings that you're getting as a contractor, and I'm being able to have my guys in the field work off of, you know, they're pretty accurate. You know, you can't always rely that the marks will be there, but you have that drawing to say, you know, we don't have this gap, but I'm showing a gas here. You know, and I like, it's a means of checks and balances. You're not relying on just one thing to make sure you guys get through the day safe.
But what saves us even more is the prudent excavator. The folks who do it right, every time. The common sense heroes.
I mean, you get your locates that are on the ground, you see where they're at, you start digging, you put your running line in, and you just do your due diligence. You know, 2 feet of that mark, you gotta be careful. You gotta hand dig down and find it yourself. I don't trust anybody. You know, I'm in charge of my crew and making sure they go home safe every day, and if I trust a locator who had a bad day and put that gas mark there, and it's 3 feet off and I don't pay attention, notice the change in the ground, change in the sand, any small change that we notice from our experience, we just do our due diligence, dig down by hand, find it, and we know we're good. I use that as, the locates I use as a reference. It's in this vicinity. I don't trust them.
I just heard a quote within the last few days that I really, really love. The U.S. damage prevention system, it depends on 100% of the people doing the right thing 100% of the time, all the time, through the duration of every single project. Think about that. If one person doesn't do the right thing, it puts the whole project at a higher risk of having a tragic incident.